What happens when a TSA agent questions a quiet man's right to carry a weathered dog tag around his neck, not realizing that man is Keanu Reeves? What began as a subtle act of judgment over a small piece of metal, etched with a fallen friend's memory, turned into a powerful moment that would shake an entire airport terminal. And by the time the dust settled, no one would forget what he said or how he said it. Oh, and before we dive into this tale, tell us, where are you reading this from? We love seeing your reactions, whether you're sipping coffee in a quiet corner or scrolling on a noisy subway. The main hall of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport buzzed with its usual chaos on Veterans Day, November 11, 2025. A day when the air carried a little more weight than usual. The terminal, the busiest in the U.S., thrummed with life. Families dragging overstuffed suitcases, kids tugging at their parents' sleeves, soldiers in crisp uniforms weaving through the crowd on their way home. The faint scent of burnt coffee drifted from a stand near Gate C, mingling with the sharp tang of jet fuel wafting in from the tarmac. Overhead, the PA system crackled with gate changes, a robotic voice slicing through the din every few minutes. Travelers shuffled in 6-foot-long TSA lines that snaked past pretzel vendors and newsstands, their faces a mix of exhaustion and holiday anticipation. It was a scene of organized madness, the kind of place where you could lose yourself or find something worth standing for. Amid that frantic crowd, one man moved at a steady, almost unbothered pace. He stood 6 feet tall, his frame lean but solid, dressed in a faded black flannel shirt that hung loosely over worn jeans. His boots, scuffed and weathered, clicked softly against the polished floor, a rhythm out of sync with the hurried steps around him. No designer watch gleamed on his wrist, no flashy accessories caught the light, no security entourage cleared his path. Around his neck, hanging loosely on a thin chain, was a small, weathered dog tag. Not his own, but one etched with Semper Fi, J.D., KIA 9/11/2001. It wasn't shiny or polished. The edges were rough, the metal dulled by time, but it carried a presence heavier than its size. This was Keanu Reeves, 61 years old, a man who'd walked through fame and loss with the same quiet stride he brought to this terminal. A few people gave him curious glances. Could it be? Flickered in their eyes, but most didn't recognize him. He passed by like any other traveler, maybe even one who seemed slightly out of place in such a polished, high-stakes environment. His dark hair, streaked with gray, fell just past his shoulders, and his face held that familiar calm, the kind that didn't demand attention but earned it anyway. The airport pulsed around him, a microcosm of America on a day meant to honor sacrifice. Veterans Day banners hung from the rafters, their red, white, and blue edges fluttering faintly in the air-conditioned breeze. A group of soldiers laughed near a coffee kiosk, their duffel bags slung over broad shoulders, while a mother scolded her toddler for tugging a star-spangled backpack off its wheels. Businessmen in pressed suits typed furiously on smartphones, their eyes darting to flight boards every few seconds, calculating delays in their heads. Through it all, Keanu moved forward, without arrogance, without hiding, just being himself. The dog tag swung gently as he walked, catching the harsh fluorescent light in brief glints, a silent testament to a promise made long ago. It wasn't a fashion statement or a prop from one of his films. It was a piece of history, a fragment of a life cut short, and it clung to him like a shadow he'd learned to carry. He reached the TSA checkpoint at Concourse D, where the line stretched back past a row of vending machines. The air here was thicker, tinged with the sweat of travelers and the faint hum of X-ray machines. Keanu stepped forward, sliding his boarding pass and ID from a worn leather wallet. The agent on duty, Lisa Bennett, stood behind the podium, her posture sharp and practiced, her Navy uniform crisp despite the 8-hour shift she had already clocked. Her name tag gleamed under the lights, and her eyes, hazel, quick, assessing, locked onto him as he handed over his documents. She was in her late 40s, a single mom who'd worked TSA since the early 2000s, her hands steady from years of scanning bags and sizing up threats. The boarding pass read, Keanu Reeves, clear as day. But Lisa hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly. This wasn't the Keanu she'd pictured, the action star, the red carpet icon. This was a guy who looked like he'd just rolled out of a pickup truck, not a first-class lounge. Sir, she said, her voice clipped but professional, glancing from the ID to his face. I need to see that item around your neck. She pointed vaguely at the dog tag, her fingers hovering, as if unsure whether to touch the air between them. Keanu didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, meeting her gaze with that steady calm that had carried him through decades of scrutiny. It's a dog tag, he said simply, his voice low but clear, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through fog. Lisa's eyes narrowed, zeroing in on the jagged edge of the metal, 2.5 inches long, a hair over regulation. Post 9/11 rules flashed in her mind. A checklist drilled into her since her first day on the job. No sharp objects, no exceptions. Sir, she said, her tone hardening. That could be considered a potential weapon. You'll need to surrender it or step out of line. The words landed like a challenge, and the air around them shifted. A man behind Keanu huffed, checking his watch, while a teenager a few spots back pulled out her phone, sensing something brewing. Keanu didn't raise his voice, didn't bristle. Instead, he touched the dog tag lightly, his fingers brushing the etched letters, and said, "This isn't a weapon. It's a memory." That was the spark, a quiet refusal that set off a chain reaction, one that would ripple through the terminal and beyond. This wasn't just about a rule anymore. It was about what that dog tag meant, tied to a day, 9/11, that still echoed in every airport checkpoint, every Veterans Day salute. Lisa's jaw tightened, her own memories stirring. A son who wanted to enlist, a fear she buried under protocol. Keanu stood there, 6 feet of quiet resolve, the dog tag glinting faintly under the lights, and the moment hung heavy, poised to shake everyone watching. By the time this played out, no one would forget what he said, or the way he said it, with a truth that didn't need to shout. The TSA checkpoint at Concourse D of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was a pressure cooker on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2025. The line stretched 6 feet deep, a restless snake of travelers clutching boarding passes and plastic bins. The hum of X-ray machines, mixed with the sharp beeps of metal detectors, punctuated by a toddler's wail and a businessman's muttered curse about missing his connection. Overhead, a digital clock glowed red, 10:47 a.m., ticking down to the next flight's boarding call. Amid this chaos, Keanu Reeves stood unshaken, his 6-foot frame steady as a lighthouse in a storm. His faded black flannel shirt hung loosely over worn jeans, and his scuffed boots planted firmly on the scuffed linoleum floor. Around his neck, the weathered dog tag, etched with Semper Fi, J.D., KIA 9/11-2001, rested against his chest, its jagged edge catching the fluorescent glare. Keanu's dark eyes, calm but unyielding, locked onto Lisa Bennett, the TSA agent who'd just issued her ultimatum: surrender the tag or step out of line. Lisa stood behind the podium, her navy uniform taut across her shoulders, her hazel eyes flicking between Keanu and the dog tag. At 48, she was a 15-year veteran of the Transportation Security Administration, her hands steady from years of patting down passengers and scanning bags. But today, her fingers twitched faintly, betraying a jittery edge. She wasn't just enforcing policy. She was haunted by a mistake from 2010, when she'd missed a smuggled blade in a carry-on, nearly costing lives. That failure had etched itself into her bones, a ghost that whispered every time she faced a gray area. Now, staring at Keanu's dog tag, 2.5 inches long, its edge sharp enough to nick a fingertip, she saw another potential threat. Post 9/11 rules were her Bible. No sharp objects, no exceptions. "Sir," she repeated, her voice firm but laced with a tremor only she could feel. "I need you to hand it over or step out of line." Her words carried the weight of authority, but beneath them lay something personal, a fear of failing again, of losing control. Keanu didn't budge. His hand rose slowly, fingers brushing the dog tag as if to steady its memory. "I've carried this through worse than this," he said, his voice low and even, slicing through the checkpoint's noise like a blade through fog. "It's not leaving my side." The words weren't defiant. They were a fact, delivered with a calm that made Lisa's pulse quicken. She'd dealt with plenty of passengers who argued, loud ones, entitled ones, drunk ones. But Keanu was different. He didn't raise his voice, didn't posture. He just stood there, 6 feet of quiet resolve, his gray-streaked hair falling past his shoulders, his face unreadable, yet somehow piercing. The dog tag wasn't jewelry or a prop. It was a relic of a promise made to a friend, Johnny J.D., who died in Kabul on that September day when the world changed. Keanu had pulled it from Johnny's gear bag after the news came, vowing to carry it until he couldn't anymore. Airports, war zones, hospital rooms. It had seen him through. And now, in this fluorescent-lit purgatory, he wasn't about to let it go. Lisa's jaw tightened, her mind racing. She knew who Keanu Reeves was. His name had clicked when she scanned his ID. But this wasn't about fame. It was about protocol, about safety, about the son she'd raised alone, now 18 and talking about enlisting. Every sharp object she confiscated felt like a shield against the fear of losing him to a world she couldn't control. "Sir," she said, stepping closer, her voice sharper now, "TSA regulations don't allow items with edges over 2 inches. That tag's a risk. You can check it or leave it." Her words sounded rehearsed, a mantra from training seminars, but they landed hollow against Keanu's stillness. Around them, the line grew restless. A grizzled man in a camo cap, a veteran by the look of his faded tattoos, muttered, "Give the guy a break, it's Veterans Day." A woman in a pantsuit sighed loudly, glancing at her watch. A teenager, earbuds dangling, nudged her friend and whispered, "Is that Keanu Reeves?" The air crackled with unease, a spark waiting for kindling. Keanu tilted his head, his eyes meeting Lisa's with a clarity that felt like a mirror. "This tag's been with me for 24 years, he said, his tone steady, but weighted, each word landing like a stone in still water. "It was on Johnny when he went down fighting. 9/11 Kabul. I promised I'd keep it close. You're telling me it's a weapon?" The question hung there, not accusing, but searching, forcing Lisa to confront the absurdity of her demand. Her cheeks flushed, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She'd faced down smugglers and liars, but this was different. This was a man whose truth didn't bend. Her mind flashed to her son, to the dog tags he might wear one day, and for a split second, she faltered. But protocol was her anchor. "It's not about what it means," she snapped, her voice rising just enough to draw eyes. "It's about the rules. Step aside, or I'm calling security." The checkpoint froze. The beeping machines seemed to fade, the crowd's murmurs growing sharper. A soldier in uniform, duffel slung over his shoulder, shook his head, muttering, "Damn shame." The teenager pulled out her phone, thumbing open TikTok to live stream. "TSA's hassling some guy over a dog tag. Look." Keanu didn't notice the camera or the shifting energy. He just stood there, his hands still on the tag, his gaze locked on Lisa. "You do what you need to," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. "But this isn't about safety. It's about what we've learned to fear." The words hit like a thunderclap, quiet but seismic, rippling through the line. Lisa blinked, caught in their truth, not just about the tag, but about her own life, her own choices. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. The moment had shifted, and the TSA checkpoint at Concourse D of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport ground to a halt on Veterans Day, November 11, 2025. The line, already 6 feet deep with restless travelers, stalled like a clogged artery, bins piling up beside the X-ray machine. The air buzzed with frustration, beeps from the metal detectors clashing with the low hum of whispered complaints. Keanu Reeves stood at the heart of it, his 6-foot frame rooted in place, a faded black flannel shirt hanging loose over worn jeans, his scuffed boots pressed into the linoleum, unmoving, while the weathered dog tag around his neck, Semper Fi, J.D., KIA 9/11/2001, glinted faintly under the fluorescent lights. Across from him, Lisa Bennett, the TSA agent, gripped her podium. Her Navy uniform stretched tight across her shoulders. Her demand still echoed, surrender the tag or step aside. Keanu's refusal. I've carried this through worse than this. It's not leaving my side, hung in the air, a quiet spark igniting a firestorm. The crowd erupted into motion, a chaotic symphony of voices cutting through the terminal's din. A grizzled vet in a camo cap, his face lined with years and sun, stepped forward from 3 spots back, his voice booming over the shuffle. Let him keep it. It's Veterans Day, for God's sake. His faded tattoos peeked out from under rolled sleeves, a testament to battles fought, and his fist clenched, as if ready to defend the point. A harried mom in a gray hoodie, juggling a toddler and a stroller, snapped from the middle of the line, her tone sharp with exhaustion. Can we move this along? Some of us have flights to catch. Her kid yanked at a star-spangled backpack, oblivious to the drama, while she shot a glare at Keanu and Lisa alike. A few feet away, a teenager, Mia, 17, with purple-streaked hair and earbuds dangling, nudged her friend, her phone already out. She tapped open TikTok, hit record, and whispered into the mic, TSA versus some dude with a dog tag. Wild. The livestream flickered to life, her followers pinging in real time. Is that Keanu Reeves? No way! The terminal, a melting pot of America, split into factions. Support, irritation, curiosity. All eyes turning to the man in the flannel. Lisa's face hardened, her hazel eyes darting from Keanu to the growing unrest. 15 years on the job had taught her to read a crowd, and this one was slipping from her grasp. Her hand hovered over the radio clipped to her belt, her fingers trembling faintly. Not from fear of Keanu, but from the ghost of 2010, when she'd missed a blade and nearly lost everything. She clicked the button, her voice low but clipped. I need backup at D12 now. Within moments, 2 guards approached, their black uniforms stark against the sea of travelers. One, a burly man with a buzz cut, stood 6 feet 2 and loomed behind Lisa, his arms crossed. The other, slimmer and younger, hovered near the X-ray, eyeing Keanu like a puzzle he couldn't solve. The line shifted uneasily, a ripple of whispers spreading. What's happening? Is he dangerous? Lisa straightened, her voice rising to reclaim control. Sir, last chance. Hand it over or we're escorting you out. Keanu didn't flinch. His hand rose slowly, fingers brushing the dog tag's rough edge, tracing the etched letters as if they were a lifeline. He looked at Lisa, then past her to the crowd, his dark eyes steady, his gray-streaked hair catching the light. This was on Johnny when he didn't come back from Kabul, he said, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the noise like a bell in fog. September 11th, 2001. I promised I'd carry it for him. The words landed heavy, each one a stone dropped into still water. He didn't shout, didn't plead. He stated it, plain and true, and the terminal hushed. The vet in the camo cap nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as if he'd heard that story in his own bones. A soldier in uniform near the back, duffel slung over his shoulder, lowered his coffee cup, his eyes softening with recognition. Even the harried mom paused, her scowl faltering as the weight of Kabul sank in. Mia's phone trembled slightly in her hand, her TikTok chat exploding. 9/11? Bro, that's deep. Views ticked up. 500, 1,000, 5,000. A modern wildfire spreading. The silence didn't last. A businessman in a pinstripe suit, 2 spots behind Keanu, yanked out his earbud, his voice dripping with impatience. This is ridiculous. Confiscate it and move on. A woman in a hijab, clutching a suitcase, shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flickering between Keanu and the guards. The vet shot back. You don't get it, suit. Some things matter more than your schedule. The line fractured further, a microcosm of America's messy heart. Honor clashing with hurry, memory with rules. Lisa's backup tightened their stance, the burly guard stepping closer, his shadow falling over Keanu. Sir, he rumbled, comply or we're done here. Lisa nodded, her lips a thin line, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Her son's face, 18 and restless, flashed in her mind. A boy who'd wear tags like that someday. Keanu touched the dog tag again, his fingers steady, his voice dropping lower still, but it carried a weight that filled the space. Johnny died, so we could stand here arguing about this, he said, his gaze locking onto Lisa's. I'm not breaking a promise for a rule. The crowd stilled again. Some nodded, their heads dipping in quiet respect. Others filmed, phones angled discreetly from bins and pockets. Mia's live stream hit 10,000 views, her whispered commentary barely audible. He's not backing down. Holy crap. The vet clapped once, a sharp crack of approval, while a retiree in a wheelchair murmured, good for him. The businessman huffed, but even he stopped typing, caught in the moment's gravity. Lisa's radio crackled, more backup on the way, but her hand froze mid-air. Keanu's words weren't loud, weren't angry. They were true, and that made them impossible to ignore. The terminal held its breath, the tension electric, poised for whatever came next. The TSA checkpoint at Concourse D of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport teetered on the edge of chaos on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2025. The line, now a snarled mess of 50 travelers, buzzed with restless energy. Phones out, voices clashing, the air thick with sweat and jet fuel. Keanu Reeves stood firm, his 6-foot frame unyielding in his faded black flannel shirt and scuffed boots. The weathered dog tag, Semper Fi, JD, KIA 9/11/2001, hung around his neck, its jagged edge the spark of this standoff. Lisa Bennett, the TSA agent, faced him, her navy uniform taut, her hazel eyes flickering with strain as 2 guards flanked her. Her demand, hand it over or you're out, had met Keanu's quiet steel. This was on Johnny when he didn't come back from Kabul. I promised I'd carry it for him. The crowd had hushed, then fractured. Vets cheering, moms grumbling. Mia's TikTok livestream spiking to 50,000 views. Now, with backup looming and the terminal holding its breath, the moment tipped toward a breaking point. From the edge of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. Officer Ryan Tate, an off-duty Atlanta cop in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered and steady. His leather jacket creaked as he moved, his 6'2" frame cutting through the throng like a blade. He'd been watching from the sidelines, coffee in hand, but Keanu's words about Johnny had stirred something. Flashing his badge, a glint of silver under the fluorescent lights, he raised his voice, firm but calm. I've seen worse on duty. Pocket knives, brass knuckles, you name it. That tag's no threat. Let the man through. His tone carried the weight of 20 years on the beat, a grounded authority that hit different from Lisa's rulebook rigidity. The burly guard behind her shifted, his arms uncrossing, while the younger one glanced at Lisa, uncertain. The crowd erupted, cheers from the vet in the camo cap, a sharp, yeah, from a soldier in uniform, Even a reluctant nod from the businessman in the suit. Mia's phone wobbled as she panned to Ryan, her live stream chat exploding. "Cop's a legend! TSA's done!" Views surged past 100,000, the moment crackling with raw, unscripted life. Keanu turned his gaze to Lisa, his hand still on the dog tag, his gray-streaked hair catching the light. "It's not about rules," he said, his voice low but piercing, slicing deeper than anger ever could. "It's about what we've been taught to fear." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, reverberating through the terminal. They weren't a challenge. They were a mirror, reflecting the post-9/11 paranoia that had shaped Lisa's world. The checkpoints, the endless scans. The vet clapped again, slower this time, a deliberate rhythm. The mom with the stroller softened, her eyes dropping to her kid's star-spangled backpack. Ryan nodded, his badge still out, his presence a silent echo of Keanu's point. Lisa froze, her radio crackling with static, more backup en route, but her hand didn't move. Keanu's calm wasn't defiance. It was clarity, and it cut through the noise, sparking a flicker of something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Lisa retreated to the TSA booth, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the counter. The guards backed off, Ryan's intervention a wall they couldn't breach. Her mind spun, flashing to her son, 18, lanky, restless, telling her last week he wanted to enlist. She'd argued, pleaded, but he'd just smiled, that same quiet resolve Keanu had. She saw him now, wearing tags like Johnny's, and the thought of losing him clawed at her gut. For 15 years, she'd buried that fear under protocol, every confiscated item a shield against chaos. But Keanu's story, Johnny, Kabul, a promise, cracked her shell. She watched him clear the checkpoint, the crowd parting as he retrieved his wallet and boots. On impulse, she stepped out, her voice shaky as she pulled him aside near a vending machine. "My boy's signing up," she said, barely above a whisper, her eyes glistening. "I can't stop him." It wasn't an apology. It was a confession, raw and unguarded, a mother's terror spilling out. Keanu looked at her, his dark eyes softening, the dog tag still warm against his chest. The terminal buzzed around them, Mia's live stream now at 500,000 views, the vet arguing with the businessman, Ryan sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. But for a moment, it was just them. He reached up, his fingers brushing the tag one last time, tracing JD with a tenderness that spoke of decades. Then, slowly, he slipped it off his neck, the chain clinking faintly as it left him. "Give it to him," he said, holding it out to Lisa, his voice steady but thick. "Tell him to come home." Lisa stared, her breath catching as she took it, the metal cool and heavy in her palm. Tears spilled down her cheeks, unbidden, unstoppable, and she clutched it like a lifeline. The crowd, now 50 deep, saw it unfold, and a slow clap started. The vet's hands first, then the soldiers, then a wave building, a roar of raw approval shaking the terminal. Mia's phone shook as she zoomed in, her voice cracking on the live stream. He gave it to her, crying RN. Views hit 1 million, the chat a flood of hearts. And OMGs, the moment transcending the screen. Lisa wiped her face, the tag trembling in her grip, her uniform suddenly too tight, too heavy. Keanu didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just nodded, a quiet grace in his 6-foot silhouette as he turned toward his gate. The crowd kept clapping, a retiree in a wheelchair joining in, the mom with the stroller wiping her eyes. Ryan tipped his coffee cup to Keanu, a silent salute, then melted back into the throng. Lisa stood there, the tag's edge pressing into her skin, her son's face clearer now than ever. Keanu's sacrifice wasn't loud. It was real, public, redemptive, a thread tying Johnny to her boy, fear to hope. The terminal hummed on, But something had shifted, and everyone felt it. Mia's million viewers, most of all. The chaos of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport faded into a distant hum as Keanu Reeves boarded his flight to Washington, D.C. on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2025. The Concourse D checkpoint, still buzzing with the echoes of clapping hands and Mia's million-view TikTok livestream, receded behind him. His 6-foot frame moved steadily down the jetway, clad in that faded black flannel shirt and scuffed boots. But the dog tag, Semper Fi, JD, KIA 9/11/2001, no longer hung around his neck. He'd given it to Lisa Bennett, the TSA agent, whose tears had marked the climax of a moment no one in that terminal would forget. As he settled into his seat, economy, not first class because that's who he was, his resolve remained intact, a quiet steel forged through decades of loss and grace. The plane taxied toward the runway, the Atlanta skyline shrinking to a blur of steel and glass, and Keanu's mind drifted. "What's worth fighting for?" he mused, his voice a whisper against the engine's roar. "If you can't hold what keeps you whole." The question lingered, unanswered, as the flight lifted off, bound for a 9/11 memorial at the Pentagon, where he'd honor Johnny and countless others. Hours later, news broke online. Veterans stand at ATL Sparks TSA review. A headline rippling across CNN, Fox, and Twitter, hinting at a shift bigger than one man or one tag. 2 weeks later, on a crisp November 25th morning, Lisa Bennett sat in her modest apartment in Marietta, Georgia, 20 miles north of Atlanta. The living room was small, but warm, sunlight streaming through a window onto a worn couch where she perched, no Navy TSA uniform in sight. She'd taken the day off, her first in months, her hair loose, her face bare of makeup. In her hand, she held the dog tag Keanu had given her, its jagged edge pressing faintly into her palm, the etched JD, a silent reminder of the day she'd stopped hiding. Her son, Tyler, 18 and lanky, had left for school, his enlistment papers stacked on the coffee table, a pen resting atop them. Lisa's phone sat propped against a mug, TikTok open, her thumb hovering over the record button. She'd watched Mia's livestream replay a dozen times, 1.5 million views now, seeing herself through strangers' eyes, rigid, then broken, then human. Taking a breath, she pressed record, her voice soft but steady. "I hid behind rules for 15 years, she said, holding up the tag, her hazel eyes catching the light. "This taught me to see people, not threats, not policies, but people." She paused, smiling faintly. A real smile, not the practiced one from TSA training. "I was scared of losing my boy, of failing again. But courage isn't control, it's letting go." She pinned the tag to Tyler's papers, a talisman for his journey, and ended the video with a nod. Uploaded, it hit 100,000 views in an hour. Comments flooding in. "You're a mom first, respect." "Keanu changed you, huh?" For Lisa, it wasn't about the likes. It was about stepping forward, whole at last. The story didn't end at the gate or the upload. Keanu's stand and Lisa's shift rippled outward, touching lives in ways neither could have predicted. The TSA review made headlines for weeks, sparking debates about security versus humanity. Op-eds in the Washington Post praised Keanu's quiet defiance, while forums buzzed with calls for softer rules on personal items. Mia, the teen with the live stream, started a hashtag, Hold What Matters, that trended for days. Kids posting pics of heirlooms and tattoos, stories of what kept them going. Officer Ryan Tate, the cop who'd tipped the scales, got a commendation from his precinct, though he shrugged it off, saying, "Just did what felt right." And in that Georgia apartment, Lisa found peace, not in policy, but in purpose. She'd FaceTimed Tyler that night, showing him the tag, her voice cracking as she said, "Come home, okay?" He'd grinned, promising he would, and for the first time in years, she believed it. This tale carries lessons we can all carry forward, humanistic threads woven into its fabric. First, there's the power of memory. Keanu held Johnny's tag not for show, but for soul, a reminder that what we've lost shapes who we become. It's a nudge to cherish what anchors us, whether it's a trinket or a promise. Second, courage isn't loud. Keanu's calm, Lisa's confession, Ryan's step forward show that strength blooms in quiet acts, not grand gestures. Third, judgment blinds us. Lisa saw a threat where there was a story, a lesson to look deeper, to ask before we assume. Fourth, redemption heals. Lisa's shift from fear to openness proves we can unlearn our walls, mend our cracks. And finally, connection matters. Keanu gave the tag not to win, but to bridge, showing that letting go can bind us closer. These aren't just plot points. They're mirrors for us asking, what do we fight for? What do we fear? What do we see? To everyone reading this, whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet town, thank you for sticking with us. Your reactions, your shares, your thoughts light up this journey. If you've subscribed, hit that bell, or joined this ride, you're the heartbeat of stories like these. Tell us below, what's your dog tag? That thing you'd hold on to no matter what. Where did Keanu's words hit you hardest? We're here because of you, and we're grateful every day for it. For Lisa, the tag became a new start. For Keanu, it was a chapter closed with grace. The news faded, the live stream slowed, but the question lingered. What's worth fighting for if you can't hold what keeps you whole? A quiet echo in a noisy world, inviting us all to answer.